Copyright disclaimer under Section 107 of the Copyright Act of 1976. Allowance is made for fair use in purposes such as criticism, comments, news reporting, teaching, scholarships, education, and research. Fair use is permitted. It seems Chicago is not the only place where mobsters like Al Capone resonate. In history, Florida has the most notorious mobster named John Ashley. And just like Chicago, it's haunted with its remembrance of Al Capone. In the Treasure Coast, it was John Ashley who people were afraid of. And folks like John Ashley, who became trapped in a world full of crime, it's said that him and his band of brothers called the Ashley Gang robbed nearly 40 banks and stole more than $1 million during the 20s. Now, this gang were fugitives and wanted by the police for a very long time. Things got worse when John went on a hunting trip with a friend from the Seminole Indian tribe. Something very bad happened on that trip, and only John returned home, though he spoke nothing of it. But when his friend's body was later discovered, John was charged with... Now, back then, the sheriff named George Baker of Gomez, where the Ashleys were living, sent officers to arrest John. But he and his gang ended up attacking them and sent the sheriff a threatening message to never return. It started a war between Sheriff Baker and the Ashley family that lasted for also a very long time, even between multiple generations of the family. But part of the problem was that the Ashley family seemed just as powerful as the police, and they were good at escaping them. It's said that John escaped jail 3 times after being locked up for his crimes, and his brother Bob even went to break him free from jail once. Bad idea, which erupted into a street shootout with the cops. Bob eventually perished, and because of the townsfolk were so scared of the Ashleys, the police held a parade where they took Bob's body into the streets so people could see that he was actually perished. How crazy is that? But you see, John truly didn't believe that he was a quote-unquote bad guy. He figured he was stealing from the rich and giving to the poor.
What is the one thing that Robin Hood is most famous for?
He robs from the rich and gives to the poor.
Like the insurance companies and the banks he was stealing from, like robbing Peter to pay Paul. But the Pauls, see, were the hard-working poor people in Florida, and he was a hero to many of them. He also employed people in his hometown with his whiskey business, his homegrown business at that. Despite that the business was illegal because of the prohibition, it still provided jobs. Now, John helped local folks earn a salary to feed their families and pay their bills, so there's nothing with that really wrong at all. But for this reason, John Ashley was pretty well loved by many of this tight-knit community. Though he was still hated by the police, especially the Sheriff Bob Baker and his son Sheriff George Baker, both sheriffs hated him so much and what they did to his father, and also because John married the woman he loved. So after getting top secret info about one of John's workers at the whiskey plant, Sheriff Bob sent 50 men on horseback to try to unalive John and his wife, Laura. The couple were able to escape police yet again, though several of their associates were unalived in this sort of shootout they had between them. Now, under a full moon on Halloween night in 1924, John and 3 prominent members of the Ashley Gang met their fateful end. Cops had set up roadblocks on a bridge where the gang was trying to cross after an intense meeting that the 4 outlaws were pow-powed and unalived on the spot. It's said that John and his gang are still trying to seek revenge to this very day from beyond the grave. Many of the places that they used to visit have some of the intense energy, including a bridge where they were unalived at. Every year on November 1st, the morning after the anniversary of their unalives, there were reports of seeing 4 pools of blood in the exact spots where the 4 men were unalived. No man can explain it. Could it be John and his men reminding the people of the brutal way that they were unalived that night? Possibly. But it was also said in reports that the cemetery where the Ashley family is buried, that there have been some unusual activity, and the residents have also complained about strange goings that they could see from their window. They'd see lights flickering on and off, almost like the flashlights, even when the cemetery was shut down for the night. They'd hear noises that sounded more like humans than animals. When complaints poured in, the security guards that worked the graveyard shift would check the grounds and find nothing. This would happen nightly after night until finally trees and fences were built to kind of create a big line of separation between the real world and the spiritual side. But just like when they were alive, the Ashleys seem to escape the realm that they are in and keep causing havoc. From beyond the days of the real world until the afterlife.